Be me? Sanchawu, policy analyst at International Trade Organization in Brussels, working on European Union trade agreements and regulatory harmonization, living with partner for 6 years. He's 37, translator at European Parliament, working in French, Dutch, and English, discussing marriage, but not committed yet. Relationship had been passionate and spontaneous early on. Lots of adventure and physical connection, but over years had settled into comfortable routine with less spontaneity and romance. I've been reading about emotional labor in relationships and how women's needs often went unmet. That spontaneous romance actually meant women waiting for men to initiate, which placed a burden on women to hint and hope rather than having their needs directly met. Believed this dynamic was unfair and needed a systematic approach to ensure equity. I started noticing that physical intimacy happened on a partner's schedule, not mine. He'd initiate when he was in the mood. I'd often go along even when I wasn't particularly interested. This seemed like a classic example of a relationship serving male needs over female needs. Brought up concerns with a partner one evening over dinner. I've been thinking about how we approach intimacy and romance. It feels unbalanced. He looked confused. Unbalanced? How I thought we were both happy. Explained that intimacy happened when he initiated, that spontaneity actually meant following his desires, not mine. That I wanted a more equitable approach where my needs were equally prioritized. He seemed willing to discuss. Okay, what would more equitable look like to you? Said, I've been thinking about creating a schedule where we'd plan romantic time in advance, ensuring both our needs were met systematically rather than leaving it to chance and spontaneity. He looked skeptical. You want to schedule romance, isn't that kind of clinical? Explained that scheduling ensured equity, that spontaneity had led to imbalance, that planning romance didn't make it less meaningful. He considered, I guess we could try it. Though, it feels weird to put intimacy on a calendar. Started creating what I called a romance schedule. Designated 2 evenings per week for romantic time together. Tuesday and Friday evenings from 8:00 p.m. to 1:000 p.m. During this time, we'd focus on connection and physical intimacy. Posted about creating a romance schedule on social media, framed as ensuring women's needs were met systematically in relationships. Got supportive responses from feminist followers. This is brilliant. No more waiting around hoping a partner initiates. Scheduling ensures equity. Also got skeptical responses. Isn't romance supposed to be spontaneous? This seems like it would kill the passion. Dismissed concerns as romanticizing spontaneity that actually served male desires. First few weeks of the romance schedule went reasonably well. Tuesday and Friday evenings, we'd have planned romantic time, would cook a special dinner, have wine, transition to intimacy. It felt organized, if not particularly passionate. Partner seemed to be going along with system, but after a month he mentioned, the schedule feels kind of mechanical. Like we're checking box rather than actually wanting to be together. Said that was just adjustment period. That we'd been conditioned to think romance needed to be spontaneous. That scheduled intimacy was equally valid. He didn't push back, but didn't seem convinced. After 2 months, noticed that intimacy outside scheduled times had completely stopped. We'd only be romantic during designated Tuesday and Friday slots. No spontaneous moments. No unexpected passion. Everything happened on schedule or not at all. Mention this to your partner. I notice we're only intimate during scheduled times now. He looked at me with a strange expression. Yeah. Because you created a schedule, I figured that's when you wanted intimacy to happen. So that's when it happens. Felt like he was being deliberately obtuse. But spontaneous romance can still happen outside schedule. He raised eyebrows. Can it, though? Because when I've tried to be spontaneous outside scheduled times, you've said you're not in the mood, or too tired. Schedule taught me when you're available for romance. So, I stick to my schedule. Realized he had a point. I'd become less receptive to spontaneity because I expected romance during scheduled times, decided schedule needed to be more detailed to address this, created an expanded version of the romance schedule, included categories, scheduled intimate time, spontaneous initiation windows, romantic gesture requirements, scheduled times remained Tuesday and Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Spontaneous initiation windows were Saturday mornings and Sunday afternoons. Romantic gesture requirements meant each partner needed to do one romantic gesture per week outside scheduled times, presented an expanded schedule to partner. He read it with an expression between amusement and concern. This is very detailed. You've scheduled when spontaneity is allowed. Explained that windows for spontaneity ensured it would actually happen. That completely unstructured spontaneity had led to imbalance. He sighed. Okay. We'll try your system. But this feels increasingly unromantic. 3 months into the expanded schedule, romance had become completely mechanical. Tuesday and Friday evenings, we go through motions. Dinner, Wein, transition to bedroom. Saturday mornings or Sunday afternoons, one of us would initiate during a spontaneous window each week. We'd each do our required romantic gesture. Everything happened exactly on schedule. But nothing felt romantic anymore. Intimacy felt like appointments we were keeping. Romantic gestures felt like homework assignments. Even spontaneous initiation felt planned because it only happened during designated windows. Posted about challenges of implementing a romance schedule, got mixed responses. Some followers encouraged me to stick with it. Men need structure to understand women's needs. Keep enforcing the schedule. Others suggested maybe the system was a problem. Romance can't be scheduled. This is killing your relationship. Defended schedule. Saying equity required structure. That discomfort was just resistance to change. Partner mentioned again that romance felt dead. We're going through motions. But there's no actual passion. It feels like we're roommates with scheduled sex appointments. Got defensive. At least my needs are being met systematically. Better than waiting for spontaneity that never came. He looked sad. Were your needs not being met before I thought we had a good relationship? Explained that good wasn't equitable. That schedule ensured fairness even if it felt mechanical. He was quiet the rest of the evening. 4 months into the romance schedule, I started noticing we'd stop touching casually. No hand-holding while watching TV. No spontaneous hugs or kisses. Everything physical had become part of the schedule. Casual intimacy had completely disappeared. Mentioned this to a partner. Asking why he'd stopped casual affection, he looked at me incredulously. Because everything got scheduled, I don't know what's allowed outside the schedule anymore. Is casual kiss a romantic gesture that counts toward weekly requirements? Or is it a separate category that needs its own schedule? Said he was exaggerating. He shook his head. I'm not exaggerating. I'm genuinely confused. You've scheduled romance so thoroughly that I don't know what's spontaneous anymore. So I stick to a schedule where I know expectations, realized schedule had created boundaries we were both staying within, decided to add a category for casual affection to the schedule, created affection guidelines, document, listed different types of physical touch and whether they counted as romantic gestures or casual affection, how frequently each should occur. When they are appropriate, presented guidelines to partners. He just started a document. You've created an instruction manual for touching you. Said it was just clarification to prevent confusion. He put the document down. This is insane. We've turned romance into a bureaucratic process. Got angry. I'm trying to create equity in our relationship. Why are you resistant to structure? He was quiet. I'm not resistant to structure. I'm mourning the death of our romance, which died the moment you put it on schedule. 5 months into the romance schedule system, our intimacy had declined dramatically. We're still following the schedule technically. Tuesday and Friday evenings. Saturday morning or Sunday afternoon spontaneous windows, weekly romantic gestures. But everything felt hollow and mechanical. Partner would show up for scheduled times, but seemed to be going through motions. No passion. No genuine desire, just fulfilling schedule requirements. I felt the same way. Schedule had guaranteed frequency but killed actual want. Posted about this challenge, framed as a partner's inability to engage emotionally with structured intimacy, got responses from followers, some supportive, saying men often couldn't handle emotional labor of scheduled romance. Others are critical, saying I created this problem. You can't schedule desire. Romance needs spontaneity to survive. Started to wonder if critics were right, but couldn't admit schedule might have been mistake. Had invested too much in defending it. 6 months into system. Partner asked if we could talk. I don't think this is working. Asked what specifically wasn't working. The schedule. The guidelines. The whole system. Our romance is dead. We're going through motions. But there's nothing real left. Defended system. Saying we were both having our needs met. Interrupted. Are we though? Do you actually feel desired? Or do you feel like appointment on my calendar? That question hit hard, because honestly I felt like appointments Tuesday and Friday. 8-10 p.m. Like dental cleaning or work meetings. He continued, I used to want you spontaneously, would think about you during the day and want to surprise you when you got home. Now I think about you and check the schedule to see if it's allowed. Said spontaneous desire had been serving his schedule. Nutors. He shook his head. It was serving our mutual desire. Now nothing serves desire because desire is dead. Killed by a schedule that replaced wanting with shouting. Didn't know how to respond because he was right. We didn't want each other anymore. We just showed up for scheduled appointments. 7 months into the romance schedule, stopped following it consistently, would skip Tuesday evening because neither of us felt like keeping appointments, would let Friday pass without scheduled intimacy. Spontaneous windows came and went, without any spontaneity. Romantic gestures became perfunctory. My partner bought flowers because it was his week. I made dinner because it was my week. Everything was an obligation. Nothing was desired. Posted about relationship struggles. Framed vaguely without mentioning the schedule. Got sympathetic responses about relationships taking work, but also responses from people who'd followed my romance schedule journey. Did the schedule kill your romance? This is what we warned about. Deleted those comments. But they stayed with me. 8 months into the system. I had an honest conversation with a partner. I think we need to talk about us. He nodded. I think we've been avoiding this. Asked what he thought was wrong. He was quiet for a moment. The schedule killed our romance. We turned intimacy into appointments, and desire died. Now we're just roommates keeping a calendar. Wanted to argue, but couldn't, because it was true. Asked if he thought we could fix it. He looked sad. I don't know. Can you resurrect a desire that's been scheduled to die? Suggested we abandon the schedule completely. Go back to spontaneity. He shook head. I don't think that works either. We've been conditioned to schedule everything. I don't know how to be spontaneous with you anymore. Realized we'd created prison. We couldn't escape. 9 months into the failed romance schedule. Barely touching each other. Living as roommates. Sharing an apartment. No intimacy. No romance. No physical connection. Everything we tried to preserve through scheduling had died. Partner sleeping in the spare bedroom most nights. Saying it felt dishonest to share bed when romance was dead. Posted about relationship ending. Framed as incompatibility and growing apart. Didn't mention the romance schedule. Got sympathetic responses about relationships running their course, but followers who'd followed the scheduled journey called it out. The romance schedule killed your relationship. You can't systematize desire. This is what happens when you turn love into logistics. Deleted comments, but knew they were right. 10 months after creating a romance schedule. My partner moved out, said he couldn't live in dead relationship anymore. That schedule had killed what we'd had, that he needed to find someone he could desire spontaneously. I packed his things feeling numb, had created a system to ensure equity and systematically destroyed our romance, posted about the breakup more honestly this time. Admitted romance schedule had contributed to relationship death. That scheduling intimacy had killed spontaneous desire. That equity through systematization had created a mechanical relationship neither of us wanted. Got very mixed responses. Some followers said I'd learned an important lesson. Romance can't be scheduled. Desire needs freedom to exist. Others criticized me for giving up on structure. You just didn't implement it correctly. Men need more time to adjust to scheduled intimacy. But most responses were from women who tried similar systems. I created an intimacy schedule with my husband. It killed our sex life completely. We're in couples therapy now, trying to resurrect spontaneity. Another wrote, scheduled sex felt like homework. Both of us started dreading scheduled nights, finally abandoned the system. But damage was done. Reading these responses was devastating. My romance schedule hadn't just killed my relationship. It had influenced others to kill theirs. Year after creating a romance schedule, living alone. My ex-partner was seeing someone new. Mutual friends mentioned they seemed very passionate, very spontaneous, and had lots of chemistry. That description hurt because it highlighted what we'd lost, what schedule had killed. Spontaneity, chemistry, passion, all dead from being systematized. The therapist asked about a romance schedule experiment. What were you trying to achieve? Explained, I'd wanted equity and intimacy. That spontaneity felt like waiting for male partner's desire. She asked a careful question. Did the schedule create equity? Thought about it. It created frequency, but killed desire. So technically, we were both equally uninterested. She nodded. That's not equity. That's shared misery. Asked if romance could ever be equitable without schedule. She considered, equity in romance isn't about equal frequency. It's about both partners feeling desired and heard. Your schedule created frequency without desire. That's not equity. It's a transaction. 2 years after the romance schedule destroyed the relationship, tried dating again. Met someone at a conference about European trade policy. We had a good conversation. Planned dinner. First date went well. Lots of chemistry. But when he suggested a second date, felt an automatic impulse to schedule it systematically. Caught myself creating a mental framework. Tuesday evening. 7290 p.m. Spontaneous kissing, allowed after 830 p.m. Realized schedule had broken my ability to just experience romance. Had conditioned myself to systematize everything. Told date I wasn't ready for a relationship yet. Needed more time to heal from the previous one. He was disappointed but understanding. Went back to therapy to work on this. Therapist helped me understand I'd use a schedule to control uncertainty. Romance is uncertain by nature. You tried to control it through scheduling. But that uncertainty is part of what makes it romantic. Asked how to learn to tolerate uncertainty again. She said it would take time. You've conditioned yourself to need structure. Unlearning means sitting with discomfort of not knowing. 3 years after the romance, I tried dating a person from work. He was a policy analyst from a different department. We had easy rapport and clear chemistry, deliberately didn't create any schedules, tried to let things develop spontaneously, but kept feeling anxious about lack of structure, would wonder when we'd see each other next, when intimacy would happen, whether needs were being met equitably, all the concerns that had led to schedule originally. Eventually, anxiety killed the relationship. He said, I seemed unable to relax. You're always analyzing whether things are fair, keeping score of who initiated what. Can't you just enjoy being together? Wanted to say yes, but honestly couldn't. Schedule had broken something in me. 4 years after the romance, the schedule destroyed the relationship. Consulting with a relationship therapist regularly, working on tolerating uncertainty and spontaneity, the therapist gave me homework to do things without planning, take a different route to work, try a restaurant without reading reviews first. Small steps toward accepting unpredictability. It was harder than expected. Would feel anxious making unplanned decisions. Needed to consult schedules even for minor choices. Realized how deeply scheduling had affected me. Not just in romance, but in all areas. 5 years after creating a romance schedule, an ex-partner got married to a woman he'd been dating for 2 years. Saw wedding photos on social media. They looked genuinely happy and connected. Her social media showed spontaneous posts about loving him. No mentions of schedules or systems, just organic expressions of affection. That's what I'd killed with a romance schedule. Organic connection and spontaneous affection. Posted reflection on romance schedule 5 years later. Acknowledged it had been a mistake. That scheduling intimacy had killed desire. That equity didn't mean systematizing everything. That my ex had found happiness with someone who didn't need to schedule romance. Got responses from followers, some appreciative of honesty. Thank you for admitting this didn't work. I was considering a similar system. Others are still defensive of the scheduling approach. You just didn't give it enough time. Structure is important for equity, but most responses were from women who tried scheduling, killed my marriage's intimacy, created obligation instead of desire. It took years to rebuild spontaneity. 6 years after the romance schedule, started dating someone new, deliberately chose a person very different from Max. Artist who was spontaneous and unstructured, though his spontaneity would help me unlearn scheduling. Our differences created friction. He'd suggest last-minute plans I couldn't handle without scheduling. I'd want to plan dates in advance. He found restrictive. Neither of us could meet in the middle. The relationship ended after a few months. He said I was too rigid. You need to know every detail before committing to anything. Can't you just see where things go? Wanted to, but years of scheduling had made that impossible. 7 years after creating a romance schedule, I published an article about an experience titled, I Scheduled Romance and Killed My Relationship. Detailed how romance schedules had destroyed intimacy, how a systematic approach had created obligation instead of desire, how both partners had ended up equally uninterested. Article got a significant response. Many women shared similar experiences. I created sex schedule, and it destroyed our intimacy. We became roommates, keeping appointments. Relationship therapists commented on an article, saying they frequently saw couples who'd systematized romance, that it consistently killed spontaneous desire, that rebuilding intimacy after scheduling was a difficult process. 8 years after the romance started, the ex-partner had first child and saw an announcement on social media. He looked radiantly happy with wife and baby, had built family with someone who could be spontaneous while I was still alone. Unable to tolerate uncertainty romance required. Therapists said rebuilding spontaneity was a long process. You've spent years conditioning yourself to need structure. Learning to sit with uncertainty takes time. Asked if she thought I'd ever have a successful relationship. She was honest. If you can learn to tolerate unpredictability. But that's hard work. You have to choose. Current reflection. 9 years after creating romance schedule, learned that scheduling romance killed spontaneous desire. That equity, through systematization, created mechanical relationship. That frequency without want was just shared obligation. That ex-partner found happiness with a spontaneous partner. That I'm still alone. Unable to tolerate romantic uncertainty. Most importantly, that romance needs freedom to exist. That scheduling intimacy killed everything worth having. That's what I learned from creating romance schedule and watching romance die on schedule, exactly as designed. 9 years later, still living with consequences of systematizing something that needed spontaneity, still unable to date successfully because I can't unlearn need for structure. That's my story about romance schedule, and how perfectly it worked to kill everything romantic on schedule. That's my complete story about Romance Schedule. 9 years after creating Romance Schedule, invited to speak at Relationship Therapy Conference about how well-intentioned systems can destroy intimacy, presentation titled When Structure Kills Spontaneity, The Romance Schedule Disaster, detailed how I'd created detailed schedule for equity, how it had systematically killed desire in relationship, how both partners had become equally uninterested through obligation, how 9 years later I still couldn't tolerate romantic uncertainty. Audience of therapists nodded knowingly throughout. Many said they'd seen similar patterns with clients. One therapist asked during Q&A, "What made you think scheduling romance would create equity?" Explained honestly, "I thought spontaneity meant waiting for male partner's desire. That scheduling would ensure my needs were met systematically. I didn't understand that desire can't be obligated into existence." Another therapist noted, "Your case shows how fear of vulnerability can manifest as need for control. Scheduling eliminated uncertainty, but also eliminated excitement. Romance requires risk of not knowing." That observation struck deep because it was exactly right. I'd been afraid of uncertain desire. So I'd scheduled it into predictable death. 10 years after the romance schedule destroyed the relationship, the ex-partner had a second child, saw family photos on social media. 2 children. Happy marriage. Spontaneous life. Comments on his posts were about how in love he and wife seemed. "You two still look like newlyweds. Beautiful family." Meanwhile, I was still single, had tried dating multiple times but couldn't sustain relationships, would automatically start creating mental schedules. Potential partners would feel controlled and leave. Therapists said this was trauma response. Romance schedule was your way of controlling fear. Now you can't experience romance without that control. You've conditioned yourself to need it. Asked if I'd ever unlearn this. She was quiet. Some people do. Some don't. Depends on how much work you're willing to do. It is sitting with discomfort. 11 years after creating Romance Schedule. Received message from woman. She'd read my article and wanted to share her story. "I implemented a romance schedule after reading your original posts before you admitted it was a mistake. It destroyed my marriage of 12 years. Scheduled sex. Killed all desire between us. We divorced after 2 years of mechanical intimacy. I wanted to tell you that your content damaged real relationships." The message was devastating. My romance schedule hadn't just killed my relationship. It had influenced others before I'd admitted my mistake. I responded by apologizing. She wrote back, "Apology doesn't fix my divorce. But I hope you understand the impact of promoting systems without thinking through consequences. Romance can't be optimized like workflow." That last line stayed with me because it captured exactly what I tried to do. Optimize romance like it was a workplace efficiency problem. 12 years after Romance Schedule. Writing book about experience titled Scheduled to Death: How I Killed Romance with Equity. Detailed complete story from creating schedule to relationship death. How I'd influenced others to damage their relationships. How 12 years later, I still couldn't maintain relationship. Publisher was interested but wanted different angle. "Can you write about how you recovered?" Readers want redemption arc. Had to admit there wasn't one. I haven't recovered. Still can't tolerate romantic uncertainty. Still automatically schedule everything. There's no happy ending. Publishers passed on the book. Market wanted growth and transformation. Your story is just a cautionary tale with ongoing consequences. That rejection stung but was accurate. I was a cautionary tale. Not a success story. 13 years after creating a romance schedule, I tried one more time to date. Met someone through work who seemed patient and understanding. Told him up front about my issues with scheduling and control. He said he appreciated honesty and wanted to try. First few weeks went okay. He was patient when I needed to plan things in advance. Gentle when I got anxious about spontaneity. But after 2 months he said he couldn't continue. Every time we're together, I can feel you mentally scheduling it, analyzing whether it's equitable, keeping score of who initiated what. I want partner who's present, not one calculating fairness equations. Tried to explain I was working on it. He was kind, but firm. I believe you're working on it. But I can't be in a relationship that feels like project. You need more time to heal. Maybe years more. That was last serious dating attempt. Accepted that romance schedule had broken me permanently. 14 years after romance schedule destroyed relationship. Ex-partner's oldest child started school. He posted proud parent photos. Wife commented about how lucky she was to have partner who was so present, never takes our family for granted, always spontaneous with affection. That comment felt like pointed reminder of what I'd had and killed with scheduling. He'd learned from our relationship, too, but his lesson was to embrace spontaneity. Mine had been to fear it even more. 15 years after creating romance schedule, accepting this was permanent. Lived alone. Worked. Had hobbies. But no romantic relationships. Couldn't maintain them. Would sabotage with need for control and scheduling. Therapist asked if I'd accepted being alone. Thought about it honestly. I've accepted I can't maintain romance. But I haven't accepted being alone. Still hoping somehow I'll unlearn this. She looked sad. 15 years of hoping suggests maybe acceptance is needed. Not of being alone forever, but of who you are now. You tried to control romance, and it controlled you instead. That observation was painful but true. I'd become defined by romance schedule. 15 years later, still unable to escape it, 16 years after romance schedule, ex-partner posted anniversary message to wife. 16 years ago I met you. 2 years after my first marriage ended, you taught me that romance needs freedom. That spontaneity is gift, not burden. Grateful every day for our unpredictable, beautiful life together. Post was clearly reference to our marriage and what he'd learned from its failure. Comments asked about first marriage. He never responded to those. Just let the message stand about spontaneity and freedom. Everything in the romance schedule had killed. 17 years after creating a romance schedule, I was invited to a podcast about relationship mistakes. Host wanted to discuss what I'd learned, explained complete story. Schedule creation, relationship, death, ongoing inability to maintain romance. Host asked, so, 17 years later, what's the lesson? Responded honestly. That romance requires vulnerability to uncertainty. That scheduling intimacy kills desire. That equity through systematization creates mechanical obligation, and that some mistakes have permanent consequences. Host pressed. Permanent. You don't think you'll ever have a successful relationship. Said quietly, I've tried for 17 years. Each attempt fails because I can't tolerate romantic uncertainty. Romance schedule broke something that hasn't healed. Maybe it won't heal. Podcast got a significant response. Many listeners related to fear of romantic uncertainty, but most were disturbed by the permanence of consequences. 17 years, and still suffering from one bad system. This is a terrifying cautionary tale. One comment particularly resonated. She tried to eliminate uncertainty from romance. Succeeded perfectly. Now I have the certainty of being alone. 18 years after the romance schedule destroyed the relationship. Ex-partner's kids were growing up. He posted about teaching daughter to ride a bike, spontaneous family moments, joy and unpredictability, everything I couldn't access because I tried to schedule it to death. Current reflection. 19 years after creating a romance schedule, learned that scheduling romance killed spontaneous desire. That equity through systematization created mechanical obligation, not passion. That both partners became equally uninterested through scheduled intimacy. That ex-partner learned to embrace spontaneity and found happiness. That I learned to fear uncertainty more and remained alone. Most importantly, some systems break what they claim to fix, and some breaks are permanent. That's everything from 19 years ago. From creating a detailed system for romantic equity to watching desire die exactly on schedule. From relationship death to 19 years of dating failures. From ex-partner's spontaneous happy family to my controlled solitary life. That's my final story about romance schedules and learning that scheduling romance works perfectly to kill everything romantic. That desire can't be obligated. Passion can't be systematized. Romance can't be scheduled without dying exactly as designed 19 years later, still living proof that trying to control uncertainty created certainty of loss and broke my ability to experience what I tried so hard to perfect through scheduling. That killed it on schedule forever.